Hello there and welcome to the channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to fix a setting fault on an Accenta G4 control panel. So a setting fault occurs when the system registers a zone as open during the setting procedure. Okay, now for a normal set, a setting fault message is normal when you open the front door of the property, and then when you close the front door again it will clear and it will eventually set. Although if that message is persistent, then that indicates that there is either a fault with your door contact on your front door, or there is a fault with another zone on the system. So that could be another door contact somewhere else, or it could be a PIR movement sensor such as this one here. So how do you identify the type and resolve it? So if it's an LCD keypad like this, it will have a zone descriptor. Now if it's programmed correctly, the zone descriptor will identify to where the cause of the problem is. Okay, so if it says setting fault living room, for example, then you know that the cause of the fault is the sensor in the living room. So once you've identified the zone, then you go to the detector in question. If it is a detector, I'll talk about a door contact in a minute, but if it's a detector, then what you want to look out for is the LED. Okay, so if you walk into that room and the LED on that detector isn't illuminating, then you can tell just by that it is either a cable fault to the detector, so it isn't receiving any power, or it is the detector that's faulty. Okay, if you walk into that area and the detector is illuminating, such as it is here, then you know it's not going to be a cable fault necessarily. It could still be, but it's likely that it isn't, because if it was, then you'd have a tamper condition. So once you've identified this sensor, how do you resolve the setting fault? So what it's caused by is the zone connections, the two zone inputs to this detector being registered as still open. So when you walk past one of these detectors, when that LED comes on, that is essentially breaking two contacts. Okay, and when that goes off, that's joining them back together so the system can set. Okay, now if the detector is faulty, what can happen is those two connections will stay permanently open all the time. So when you're trying to set, you'll just have a continuous setting fault message. Okay, so what you need to do is you actually need to open the PIR detector. If it is a PIR detector, as I said, if it's a door contact, then I will put a timer on screen to where you can skip to where I'll talk about the door contact. But if it's a PIR, what you need to do is open it to investigate the fault. Okay, so now when you open one of these detectors, it will go into a tamper condition. Now this can be silenced simply just by entering in your user code. Okay, if you just enter your 4-digit code, and that will silence the system, you don't need to worry about it. Okay, now once it's open, here we are. So now I've opened the detector. You can see the series of connections in the bottom here. The first thing you want to check, if the LED isn't illuminated on the PIR when you move, is that we've got power to the detector. So how can we do that? Well, what you need is one of these multimeters. Now these can be picked up fairly inexpensively. They're only a few quid from most home improvement stores like B&Q, Screwfix and all that in the UK. Okay, and what you want to do is set this to the, now it will vary on some, but on most you'll have a volts, let this focus, you'll have a volts and then a direct current symbol, which is what these sensors use. And you want to set that to the 20 range, okay, because you're basically checking for your 12 volts input to the PIR. So you want to put that on that correct range. Okay, make sure your leads are plugged in properly. Now you will probably need 2 people for this, one to hold the multimeter, and then you'll need to probe onto the connections. So what you want to do is you just want to put red to red, so the colours may vary, but positive to positive, so red to red, black to black in this case, on your power input connections. And you want to check that there is 12 or 13 volts present to that detector. If there isn't any power to this detector, okay, then that indicates that there's a cable fault. Now, the only way to resolve a cable fault is to run a new cable, essentially. So, but it's highly unlikely that it would be a cable fault, because if it was a cable fault, then it's likely it would have gone, the slice of the cable probably would have gone through most of it, and that would cause a tamper condition. What if you've checked the detector and there is power? Well, in that case, what you need to do is you need to look on the PCB, and you can see there's 2 inputs labelled alarm. Now these could be either labelled alarm or zone. Either way, it's, you know, the alarm input connections is power, alarm and tamper on most detectors, 6 connections. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to remove the 2 alarm zone inputs, okay, for this detector. You want to unscrew those and you want to join them together, okay. So just take them out and twist them. Position that just in the corner of the PIR so that they're not anywhere near the other connections. Replace your PIR cover. Once you've replaced your PIR cover, okay, unless you've got a engineer restore enabled on your panel, which is unlikely to be honest, but if there is an engineer restore and you don't know your code, I have got a video on that, so how to reset it. But usually what will happen is you'll click the detector back together, so you've linked your 2 wires inside, remember your 2 alarm wires, and it will just reset, okay? So what can you do from there? Well, what you can try, with the detector all closed up and those 2 connections linked in the corner of the PIR, you can try and set the system again, and what you should notice is that the setting fault message for that detector should no longer be there, okay? Now if it is no longer there when you try and set it, then you've identified that the cause of the fault is in fact the detector, okay? Now these, if it is the detector that's at fault, these are really simple to replace. Pretty much all PIRs are exactly the same. So you just need a wired PIR. You can get these on eBay, Texicom, Pyronics. They all do the same thing essentially. If you can, try and get one that's the same as the others. So what you can do is you can have a look inside, and there's usually a brand name or a model number, and if it isn't too old, the system, then you might still be able to get the detectors. So it's just a like-for-like replacement, which makes fixings and that easier. But it is really simple though to replace these, as you simply just take each wire out one by one. But as you take each one out, take note of the connections and also tape them so that none of them make contact as you take it off the wall, and that. And yeah, just fit a new detector, put the wires back like for like, so power, alarm, tamper, make sure you get positive and negative the right way around, red and black usually. Okay, and it's just a like-for-like replacement. So now I'm going to talk about if the fault is with a door contact. Okay, so with a door contact you have two pieces. If you look at that door and one of those pieces is missing, okay, then that is immediately the cause of the fault, because the door contacts need the magnet piece to operate. But should that magnet piece be missing, that zone will be open, as they call it, and you'll have a continuous setting fault and the system will not set. So to replace those is really simple. Okay, so it's just two wires in there. Okay, the same as the PIR, it's just the two alarm wires across the switch unit inside, a wired magnetic door contact, and that will come in two pieces, and they're usually the same size. They're just little rectangle pieces, and yeah, it's just a like-for-like replacement. Those two wires back in the new one, and mount the two pieces, make sure they're aligned, and that should be it. Now, as I say, if you were to replace that and the fault still persists, then it is likely to be a cable fault. As I say, the only way to resolve cable faults is to either use spare cores in that cable or just to replace it. But that's a more advanced thing. If that needs to be done, to be honest, it's probably easier getting an alarm company out to sort it. Okay, so you found the zone in fault, okay, and you want to use your system up until you replace the detector or PIR or get any cabling issues sorted. So how do you bypass that zone so that you can still use your system normally? So if it is programmed in, it is possible to omit the zone. Okay, so you can omit a zone that will not set so that you can set the system, although this is only temporary every time you set. So every time you set, you will have to keep omitting it, all that. Now, it's not always programmed in, but if it is, then what you can do is when you enter in your code, okay, the system does its countdown and you've got your setting fault for whichever zone it is, you can simply press the omit key on the keypad, okay, and then you can enter the zone number in and omit that zone which is causing the fault. Now what it will say is the number, so it will say setting fault and it will have a number and it will have the zone descriptor. Okay, so if it's like zone 4 living room, then you know that you can enter your code in, press omit. If it's programmed, it may not be, in which case you'll need the engineer method, which I'll show in a minute. You can press omit and then the 4 key, and that will omit that particular zone, and you can set the system just by pressing tick after that. Now if it isn't programmed in, so if you cannot omit the zone, it says no zone omittable, then there is a method you can use which involves the engineering menu. Now note, to do this you will need the engineer code. Now if you don't know this, I have got a video on the channel which shows you how to reset it. It's a simple procedure to reset it. So how do you disable a zone from the system so that you can set it? So you press P, you want to put your engineer code in, okay, and you want to scroll to set up programs, okay, set up programs, and do tick. Now program 1 is the full set, Okay, now if you've got night set or anything like that enabled, you can go in there and do exactly the same thing, but for the most part you'll just be using full sets. You press 1, and here you've got program edit used zones. So if you want to press tick. Now what you want to do is you want to scroll using the arrow to the zone which is causing the fault. So for example, this PIR here is zone 2 on this system, and it is labelled as living room. Now currently that isn't used, but this would say yes. You can toggle between that by pressing the zone number, and that will toggle. So normally it would say yes. If you want to toggle that zone off, you press it and it will say no. Okay, you want to press reset, which is X or reset, and that is it. You've now deactivated that zone from the system. So you can use the system if you don't wish to replace the PIR or change any cabling. It is possible to still use the system. Okay, but all you've done is you've basically isolated that from the system, so that area will not be alarmed when it is set. That's one thing to be aware of. You can just leave it like this and reset the system. You can set and unset it and it'll be fine. Although if it is a door contact, if it's your front door and you isolate that, then you will not be able to set and unset the system. It just won't work properly, to be honest. But if it's a PIR, then you can omit that and it will work. It will set and unset and it should be fine. Okay, yeah, so that's the engineering method. But so that's only if you know your engineer code. So yeah, that's a few methods I've explained. So I hope this video has been some help. And yeah, goodbye.